in the middle. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Treiger, who Murray is trying so hard to introduce. I'm in Seattle, and I was supposed to be in Spokane to visit with all of you this week, and I'm really happy to be visiting with you in this forum. Just to give you a sense of who I am, I did go to the University of Washington for a quarter with Murray. And then I went to Barnard College. I went to law school at New York University School of Law. Then I came back here to Seattle and practiced law for some time, raised 4 children. And then I decided, you'll hear more about it, but I decided 5 years ago to leave my practice and to write a book about my in-laws' experience. Shlomo's my husband, his parents, Sam and Esther Goldberg, about their Holocaust survival and escape from death. And so I wrote a book about it, and that is in part what I'm going to talk about today. So let me just do one quick thing. Okay, so with the introduction of myself, I will just—
Can you hear me?
So yeah, Neil, you should probably mute the Huppin. Okay, so today, in this strange way, we find ourselves gathered in these little boxes on a screen, each of us in our own home, separated. But I'm really, like I said, very, very happy to be here with all of you, because we're here to celebrate, to thank and support the Spokane Area Jewish Family Services. This organization is part of the lifeblood of the Spokane Jewish community, helping our seniors, pulling together a Jewish film festival, as we heard, as you all know very well, serving the underprivileged and those who need help, now more than ever. I am extremely honored to be sharing the afternoon with all of you, and especially with Carla Pepperzak, who has educated so many about the Holocaust. She stands before us as a testament of how to rise above evil and hate. I'm also really honored to be here with Doctors Bill and Berdine Bender. Their commitment to the Jewish community is deep, and their active involvement in the larger Spokane community is truly impressive. But this thing that we call Jewish community is really a living entity. It's a social construct, to be sure, but it's one that speaks to us deeply as humans and as Jews. We need 10 for a minyan to have synagogue services. We gather with friends and family at our tables for Shabbat and for holidays. We study together, and our conversations are nothing if not dynamic. The ancient practice of pilpul, give and take, is still alive and well in all of our endeavors. This pandemic and the necessary restrictions that accompany it create a huge hole in our lives and in the life of the Jewish community. I feel it strongly. Synagogue attendance, community meetings, gatherings, they were woven into the fabric of my life. And now my calendar sits mostly empty, and my days are filled with attempts to take my free-floating anxiety, which I'm sure we all share, and put it to some good use. One thing that many people appropriately have been speaking about, including the theme for the Jewish Family Services event and year, is gratitude. We have been given a unique opportunity to look at our lives and think about what we are grateful for. You know, I had a head-on collision with gratitude in June of 2016. And in a way, that collision prepared me just a little bit for this pandemic. Let me explain. As you heard, I wrote a book about my in-laws, Sam and Esther Goldberg, and their lives in Eastern Europe during the Holocaust. I had heard parts of their story ever since I joined the Goldberg family about 35 years ago, believe it or not. And I knew it just had to be a book, but there was never the right time for me. I was busy with the law practice, raising children. But 5 years ago, I saw my opportunity and I took it. And I decided to leave my law practice and write this book. Unfortunately, Sam and Esther died years ago, and I didn't get to ask them my myriad of questions. But I spent 3 years researching and writing the book. My goal was to take Sam and Esther's story and put it into historical context. But as I worked and as I dug, their story became my story. And that is when I collided with gratitude. So I can't tell the whole story today, not enough time for that. Just read the book. But here's the part I want to share with you today. It's about how Sam and Esther met each other. Esther evaded a Nazi roundup of her town in September of 1942 by hiding in an attic for 3 days. When she came out of the attic, she was starved and scared. She went to her Polish neighbors and she knocked on their doors and asked for some food. She was starving and a place to hide. House after house, person after person, they turned her away. Get away, it's too dangerous. Go away now, or I'll turn you into the Germans. So she kept running, and she ran for about 4 kilometers just out of town through the woods. She reached the home of a woman that she knew from town named Helena Stish. She knocked on her door and asked for help. Helena opened the door and looked at this hungry, bedraggled 21-year-old woman. And she said, yes, I will help you. And for a year, Helena and her sister-in-law, Vladislava, who lived just next door, and really everyone in the family helped her to survive. She hid mostly in the forest and in their 2 barns. But during that year, while Esther was hiding there, my father-in-law, Sam Goldberg, was in the nearby death camp Treblinka, where 870,000 people were murdered by the Nazis, primarily Jews. There were a few thousand Roma that were murdered there, but otherwise it was Jews. He escaped Treblinka on August 2nd, 1943, during the famous prisoner uprising, which he helped to plan and execute. He ran for his life and ended up about 15 miles away in the exact patch of forest where Esther had been hiding. They met there, and Sam told her he just escaped from Treblinka and needed a place to hide. The Nazis and the Ukrainians were right behind him. They were chasing all the escaped prisoners to try to recapture them. And of course, they would have killed them immediately. So Esther couldn't believe that someone had escaped from Treblinka. By that time, in the summer of 1943, everyone knew what was going on at Treblinka. So she took Sam to her angel, Helena Stish, and she again knocked on the door and begged her to allow them to hide in her barn during this massive search that was underway. Helena looked at them and said, "You're crazy. You can't hide in my barn. If they find you, they will kill you for sure, but they'll kill me and they'll kill all of my children." She was right, and that would have happened for sure. But somehow Esther convinced her to allow them to hide in the barn. Golden Tongue, my mother-in-law. After those few days, Sam decided to stay and hide with Esther. They had an idea. They were going to go deeper into the forest and dig a pit. They covered the pit with wooden planks and with brush from the forest floor. And they lived in that pit for the next year. It was just a hole in the ground. No light, no toilet, no place to wash, no bed, nothing but darkness and bugs. They subsisted for a year, hungry all the time, dirty. You can just use your imagination. They gathered mushrooms from the forest floor, and in the summer, they found some berries to eat. The Stish family brought them food most days when it was safe. They'd leave a pail near the pit, and the hidden Jews would emerge at night to be nourished for another day. About a year later, July of 1944, Sam and Esther were liberated by the Soviet army, and they emerged from their underground hiding place. Just a few short months later, they were married. Believe it or not, they lived in Poland for a whole nother year, gave birth to their first child, my sister-in-law, Faye, and then they moved to a displaced persons camp in Germany, and they lived there for 4 years before they got the golden ticket visas to the United States. They immigrated to the United States in May of 1949. And I just realized just before we started this event that this is May. This is the month when they came to America. It would have been 71 years ago today that they arrived in New York Harbor as refugees with no English and no money. But they made it. They built a new life and a family. And they had 2 more children, one of whom is my husband, Shlomo. Well, so when I decided to write this book, I knew I was going to have to go back to Poland and walk in their footsteps. I wanted to go to their hometowns. I wanted to go to Treblinka. And I had a dream of finding Helena Stish's home. In the end, my whole family ended up going with me, my husband and our 4 children and a son-in-law. And through some absolutely miraculous events, I promise, miraculous events, we were able to meet the 3 surviving children of the 2 Stish families. They were in their 80s and 90s, but we got to meet them, plus their children and their grandchildren. So we sat with them in this tiny room in rural Poland, about 50 miles northeast of Warsaw. And Geniek Stish, who's the youngest of all the Stish children, now in his late 80s, turned and he said to Shlomo, listen, when we're done talking, if you want, we can take you out to the forest and we'll show you the pit that your parents lived in. And we were, what? We couldn't believe it, that the pit was still there and they could show it to us. How could that be? Well, we followed Geniek deep into the forest. He stopped and pointed to the ground, and there it was, a pit. It was degraded, it was eroded, it was full of leaves. It was definitely a pit, and he knew exactly where it was, as he was the one who in every day brought the food out to them, because he was the most inconspicuous young boy. He was like 9 or 10. So it wouldn't have been suspicious for him to be out in the forest. But it was that day that I collided with gratitude. It was there, staring into the pit that my in-laws lived in for a year, that I decided not to take my life for granted. Moreover, not to take what I have in life for granted. I knew that when I returned to my hotel in Warsaw later that day, exhausted and drained, and I would crawl into a nice, warm, comfortable bed. And when I got back home to my house a week later, I would come to my beautiful home in Seattle with a refrigerator full of food and a closet full of clothes. I decided to live my life differently, with gratitude and appreciation for what I have and the people in my life, my family, my friends, my community. I have tried these past 4 years to be the one to help, to show kindness, to give people the benefit of the doubt. It makes me a more joyful and happy person. This pandemic has yet again highlighted for us how we take so much for granted until something, even if it's as small as an invisible virus, happens to come along and shake us out of our routine and forces us to rethink our lives and appreciate people and things in a new way. This brings us back to the beginning, community and the Spokane area Jewish Family Services. We are here today to show gratitude to JFS and those that founded and serve this organization. We Jews have survived thousands of years and have developed a very unique resilience. We will find our way through this pandemic and come out stronger and more resilient and with a renewed sense of community. I say this in part because Sam and Esther's story gives me hope. And I believe that we will appreciate in a new way what it means to gather together and the power and impact of our community. We've come together today in a virtual gathering, which is so meaningful and so impressive that this was pulled off. So yasher koach to Neil and everyone who worked on it. But speedily in our days, we'll gather again in person with a renewed sense of purpose and resolve. In only 11 days, we're going to celebrate the holiday of Shavuot, which commemorates the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. This was the beginning of our people. We stood together as one and began our long journey that has brought us here to Spokane, Washington, to Seattle, Washington. How is it that the Jewish people are still around, that we're here at all? It's most unlikely, really. I believe it's because at that first Shavuot, when we stood together at the foot of the mountain, we accepted the charge to be a community of ideals and morals, an ethical community of caring for one another, of welcoming the stranger and the convert, of acting as a kahal kadosh, a holy community. That's what you are all doing, creating a holy community of wonderful people who care. Through the Spokane Jewish Area Family Services, you are the ones who show kindness and extend a hand. You are the ones to help bring the Spokane Jewish community together to carry on our long tradition. So thank you for all of you do, for all that you do, and for coming together today in this great celebration.